We are Vega, Raquel, Luna, Sara, Elena, and Judit, and we are going to tell you a story about Mouse. Chapter 1, The Sheik. The chapter 1 starts with the main character Art going to his father's house to visit him after a long time. He gets interested about his father's story of his life in Poland and the war. His father starts to narrate the story from the beginning when he meets Art's mom, Anja. Chapter 2 starts when Vladek is telling how he met Anja. He explains that Anja had a communist boyfriend before him, and the police found out about it, so they went to Anja's house searching for some papers, and they almost got into jail about it. After some time, Anja got sick, and they had to go to Czechoslovakia, where they stayed for 3 months while she was recovering. When they got back home, Vladek found out that someone had stolen him from the factory where he worked at, but they recovered really quickly. There were beginning to be riots in the city, and there were problems between the Jews and the Nazis. A year later, Vladek is notified that he had to go to the German frontier, and Anja, her son, had to go to Sosnowiec because a war was about to start.
Chapter 3. War Prisoner. Vladek continued to tell Art the history. His father didn't want him to go to the army, even though he went. There, he killed the first person. After all of that, a group of prisoners with Vladek inside were sent into a barn for work in exchange of food and a house to live. After a while, all of the prisoners were sent in a train to Poland. Vladek got out in Lublin, and people told him that the Nazis were going to kill them. So he made a plan. He took another train in direction to his home to go back with his family. When he arrived there, he discovered that his mother had cancer, and after 2 months, she died. Chapter 4. The Knot Gets Hotter. The Sibylger house was abetted by 12 people, and an organization gave them food. Vladek, as he didn't have that much money, he sold jewelry, gold, and food that he obtained in the black market. It was a hard situation on the city, so that obligated Vladek's family to give their child to other people. And all of the Jews had to move from one house to another. Every Jew that was more than 70 years old had to move to Czechoslovakia, and a register was made by Geminids on the stadium, which was divided in two, the left and the right. The left were the old, the ones that had a lot of kids and the ones that have no job card, and the right was the ones that had work conditions. Vladek's family were on the left side, so they were sent to Auschwitz.
Chapter 5. Borrow. Art visits his father again. Mal explains to Art why Vladek was angry. In 1943, all the Jews who were in Sosnowiec were permanently moved to the ghetto. Once there, the prisoners are taken to their jobs in Sosnowiec with an hour and a half each day. In June, the Nazis killed the Jewish council of the Rodula ghetto and moved them to another house, where Vladek builds a bunker. One day, the Gestapo arrives and takes Vladek and his family to Auschwitz. In the distance, Vladek sees his cousin, Jacob, who agrees to help them in exchange for financial compensation. In 1943, the Nazis continued to transport Jews from Rodula to Auschwitz. Haskell learned that they will take everyone who is left and goes out on his own, while his brother creates a bunker in a factory and invites Vladek and his family to stay there with them. After many days, some come out of the bunker and the guards kill them. When there is no one else in the ghetto, Vladek and Anja go out. Chapter 6. Mousetraps. Vladek and Mala enters the kitchen and Art shows them the drawing of the comic. Mala and Vladek consider that the comic will be special, but the conversation ends in an argument. In 1914, Anja and Vladek return to Sosnowiec. They manage to hide on Mr. Skauka's farm. Vladek meets Mr. Motonowa and she allows them to stay at her house. Vladek goes to Hungary with Anja because he doesn't feel safe in the city, but they betray them and put all the Jews in jail. A week later, Anja and Vladek meet again in the transport that takes them to Auschwitz. Vladek tells Art that once there, they are separated again.
Part 2, Chapter 1. Art and François were in vacation with some friends at Vermont. He was deciding which animal will represent François in the comic. Suddenly, a friend interrupted him to say that his father had a heart attack, but it was a lie. He only wanted to talk with him and say that Mala had gone and stole him. Art and François go to Vladek's house to spend the whole summer and help him. Then Art and Vladek go for a walk to continue the story. Vladek talks about his experience in jail. He talks about how he became an English teacher of the police supervisor at the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Because of that, he received better food and objects he needed. Then, 2 months later, they sent him to work as blacksmith. Chapter 2, Auschwitz. Time flies. Art begins to think about events in his life, as the death of his father 5 years ago and the birth of his first child. As he felt bad, he visited his psychologist, and then he is more motivated and continues to listen to his father's recordings. In Auschwitz, Vladek is working in a restaurant, and as his boss doesn't like him very much, he gave him food. It's in Birkenau, miles away from Vladek's, but they keep in contact thanks to a Hungarian Jew, which was the mistress of a Nazi ward. Then Vladek went as a worker to Birkenau, but a guard watched him with Anja, so he beat him. He went back to Auschwitz, where he now works as a shoemaker. There was a new factory where Anja and Vladek meet, where they cave and carry bones. The Nazis have to dismantle the camp to send it to Germany.
9. And here my problems began. The Russian army is very close, and the Nazis plan to take all the prisoners to the heart of Germany. Nazis make the prisoners walk long distance through the forest and icy snow. Those who can't stand the pace of walk are shot. The next morning they are forced to board a train and put about 200 Jews in its carriage. Vladek improved a hammock in which to rest. Thanks to this, he is saved. The train goes on for some time and then stops for many days. Then the soldiers force them to lower the corpses and clean the wagon. Then on the way they find out that they are going to Dachau. Once at Dachau, they sleep on dirty straw covered with lice that transmit typhus. Vladek opens a gown on his hand and lets the infection spread so that he is sent to the infirmary, where he is given 3 meals a day and has a bed to share with only one person. Vladek befriends a Frenchman. He is not Jewish, so he is allowed to receive packages from his family. He usually shares his contents with Vladek, who gets extra food. Vladek contracts typhus. They take him to the train that will take them to Switzerland. Chapter 10. Saved. Vladek wants Artie to stay with him, but he refuses. Artie wants to know how his mother survived. Vladek tells him Manthi keeps her safe. She was released near Russia and then returned to South Norway. Before the train reaches its destination, they force all prisoners to get off and walk towards the border. On the way, the guards stop them and force them to stay in place for hours. The prisoners walk in different directions, and a German army patrol stops them. Then Vladek met Sivek. They wait in fear all night, sure they will be killed, but the next morning when they come out of their tents, they found out that all the Germans are gone. When Vladek and Sivek drive away, they met other German patrol, but the next morning they have left. After some time of marching, they arrived at an empty house. The two stayed there for days, and finally the Americans arrived and finished putting them to safety.
Chapter 5, second part. Vladek and Mala meet again. Both go to New York because Vladek has health problems. Art visits Vladek to ask him about the end of the war. Vladek and Siev are transferred to a displaced persons camp in Hanover with Siev's brother. When they arrive, Vladek goes to the camp to ask about his wife. During these times, Anja regularly goes to the Jewish organization to get news about Vladek. They undertake a separate trip to Soste, where they finally meet, and at the end Vladek asks Art to go to sleep.